called from the ER. My son let it ring, so I left my goodbye on the lawyer's desk. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room buzzed with a harsh, clinical indifference that seemed to mock the chaos of human suffering below. I lay on a gurney, my body trembling not from the cold but from the crushing realization that the chest pains I'd been ignoring for weeks had finally brought me here, alone, in the middle of a Tuesday night. The 4-needle in my arm felt like a tether to a life I wasn't sure I wanted to keep fighting for anymore. My phone sat heavy in my shaking hand, the screen displaying my son Marcus's contact photo, a picture from his college graduation where he smiled broadly, his arm around me, both of us believing we had a future filled with Sunday dinners and grandchildren's laughter. The pain had started during dinner, a sharp, stabbing sensation that radiated from my chest down my left arm like lightning through my bones. I'd been eating alone again, the dining room table set for one, the chair across from me perpetually empty since my husband Robert passed 3 years ago. The silence in the house had become so complete that even the tick of the grandfather clock sounded like thunder. When the pain hit, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe my heart was finally giving up, tired of beating for a life that felt increasingly meaningless. But as I dialed 911, gasping for breath, all I could think about was Marcus, my only child, the boy I'd raised to be a man, who now lived 2,000 miles away in Seattle, building a life that seemed to have no room for his aging mother. Before I dive deeper into this story, I want you to know that you're not alone if you're watching this from your own hospital bed, or if you're caring for an aging parent, or if you feel forgotten by the people you've given everything to. Please take a moment to let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to this community. And if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, because we're here to support families going through these exact situations. You matter, and your story matters too. The paramedic, a young woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, had asked for my emergency contact as they loaded me into the ambulance. "My son," I managed to whisper, giving her Marcus's number. She dialed it immediately, the phone ringing on speaker as the sirens wailed through the empty streets of Columbus, Ohio. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Then that familiar, devastating sound, the mechanical voice announcing that the person I was trying to reach was unavailable. My heart, already struggling, seemed to skip entirely. Even in my moment of greatest need, when machines were monitoring every beat, when doctors were murmuring about possible heart attacks, my own son couldn't be bothered to answer his phone. The emergency room doctor, Dr. Martinez, was a man in his 40s with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much suffering. He explained my condition with clinical precision: unstable angina, dangerous but treatable with immediate intervention. "We need to keep you for observation," he said, checking his clipboard. "Is there someone we can call? Family?" I gave him Marcus's number again, watching as he stepped away to make the call. Through the thin curtain, I could hear the phone ring and ring before going to voicemail. Dr. Martinez returned with an apologetic expression. "I left a detailed message," he assured me. "I'm sure he'll call back soon." But hours passed, and my phone remained silent. The night stretched on like a cruel joke, each minute another confirmation that I was truly alone in this world. The next morning brought a different kind of pain, not the crushing weight in my chest, but the hollow ache of abandonment that settled in my bones like winter cold. A nurse named Sarah, a motherly woman with silver hair, sat beside my bed during her break. "Still no word from your son?" she asked gently. I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She patted my hand with the practiced comfort of someone who'd witnessed countless family tragedies. "Sometimes people handle fear differently," she offered, though we both knew she was being kind. "Fear didn't excuse letting your mother face a potential heart attack alone. Fear didn't justify ignoring desperate calls from a hospital." As I lay in that sterile room, watching the sun rise over a city that felt foreign despite being my home for 30 years, memories flooded back like water through a broken dam. I remembered the night Marcus was born, how I'd held his tiny, perfect body against my chest and promised him everything: my protection, my devotion, my very life if necessary. I remembered the years that followed, the sleepless nights when he was sick, the proud moments at school plays and soccer games, the way he used to crawl into bed with me after nightmares, whispering that I was the bravest person in the world. Where was that little boy now? When had my brave child become a man who could ignore his mother's pain? The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been gradual, like erosion wearing away a cliff face until suddenly there was nothing left to hold on to. After Robert's death, Marcus had visited for the funeral, stayed a week, then returned to his life in Seattle with promises to call every Sunday. The calls became sporadic, then monthly, then holidays only. He'd built a successful career as a software engineer, bought a beautiful house with his girlfriend Emma, traveled to exotic locations that he shared on social media but never in phone calls with me. I'd become a footnote in the story of his success, a duty to be managed rather than a relationship to be cherished. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd sacrificed everything to give him the tools to abandon me. When he was 10 and showed an aptitude for computers, I'd worked double shifts at the diner to afford programming classes. When he needed a laptop for high school, I'd sold my wedding ring to buy the best one available. College tuition, graduate school, the down payment on his first apartment. I'd given him everything, including the financial freedom to never need me again. I'd been so proud of his independence that I'd failed to notice it had become indifference. Dr. Martinez discharged me on Thursday afternoon with a medication regime and strict instructions to reduce stress. "Do you have support at home?" he asked, glancing at my still silent phone. "Someone to help you with daily activities while you recover?" I lied and said yes, because the alternative, admitting that my only child had completely abandoned me, felt too pathetic to voice. The taxi ride home felt like a funeral procession, each familiar street a reminder of the life I'd built around a son who no longer cared whether I lived or died. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Smaller somehow, despite being the same four-bedroom colonial where Marcus had grown up. The photos on the mantelpiece, his school pictures, family vacations, graduation ceremonies, now looked like artifacts from someone else's life. I sat in Robert's old recliner, the leather still bearing the imprint of his body, and finally allowed myself to cry. Not just for the heart attack, but for the gradual death of the most important relationship in my life. My son had become a stranger who happened to share my DNA. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I called Marcus not as a mother-seeking connection, but as a woman demanding accountability. The phone rang 6 times before he answered, his voice distracted and slightly annoyed. "Hey Mom, what's up? I'm actually in the middle of something." No acknowledgement of the hospital calls. No concern for my well-being. Just the casual dismissal I'd grown to expect. "I was in the hospital," I said quietly. "Heart problems. They called you multiple times." There was a long pause, then a rush of what sounded like scripted concern. "Oh my God, are you okay? I'm so sorry. Work has been crazy, and Emma and I were at this conference in Portland, and my phone was on silent." The excuses poured out like water from a broken faucet, each one confirming what I already knew. I was no longer a priority in his life. "I could have died, Marcus," I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "I was alone in the emergency room, afraid and in pain, and you couldn't be bothered to answer your phone." Another pause, shorter this time. "Mom, you're being dramatic. You're obviously fine now. These things happen. I'll try to visit soon. Maybe for Christmas or something." Dramatic. The word hit me like a physical blow. My potential death was dramatic. My fear was an inconvenience. My need for my son's love was asking too much. I hung up without saying goodbye. The weeks that followed brought a clarity I'd never experienced before. As my body healed, my mind began to process not just what Marcus had done, but what I'd allowed him to do for years. I'd enabled his selfishness by accepting crumbs of attention and calling it love. I'd excused his neglect by telling myself he was busy, successful, living his best life. But success without compassion isn't success at all. It's just elaborate selfishness. I'd raised a man who valued his comfort over his mother's life, and I'd done it by never demanding better from him. The decision came to me on a rainy October morning as I sorted through Robert's things, a task I'd been avoiding for 3 years. In his desk drawer, I found our old wills, documents that left everything to Marcus without question or condition. Robert and I had assumed that love was inherited along with assets, that providing for our son's future would somehow guarantee his presence in our present. We'd been wrong. Love isn't inherited. It's earned, demonstrated, reciprocated. And Marcus had stopped earning mine the day he decided his mother's life was less important than his convenience. I made an appointment with Robert's old lawyer, Harold Pemberton, a dignified man in his 70s who'd handled our family's legal affairs for decades. Harold's office smelled of leather and old books, a comforting weight of tradition and responsibility. "Eleanor," he said warmly, "how can I help you today?" I placed the will on his mahogany desk and looked him in the eye. "I want to change everything," I said. "I want to leave my estate to organizations that actually help people, instead of to a son who's shown he doesn't deserve it." Harold's expression shifted from warmth to concern. "This is a big decision, Eleanor. Perhaps we should discuss your relationship with Marcus first." I told him everything, the missed calls, the indifference, the years of one-sided love that had culminated in abandonment during my darkest hour. The new will was surprisingly simple to draft. My house would go to Habitat for Humanity, to be used for a family who understood the value of home. My savings would be divided between the local children's hospital and a scholarship fund for students whose parents worked multiple jobs to afford their education, kids whose sacrifice would be appreciated, unlike mine had been. Marcus would receive $1 and a letter explaining exactly why he'd lost his inheritance. Not out of spite, but out of truth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is show them the consequences of their choices. Harold tried one more time to dissuade me. "Children sometimes grow up, Eleanor. They realize what they've lost and try to make amends." I appreciated his optimism, but I was done waiting for Marcus to become the man I'd hoped he'd be. "Harold," I said, signing the final document with steady hands. "I spent 32 years giving him chances to show he cared. He's shown me exactly who he is, and I finally believe him." The papers were filed, the witnesses signed, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Marcus called 3 days later, his voice bright with fake cheer. "Hey Mom, Emma and I are thinking about coming home for Thanksgiving. Would that work for you?" I almost laughed at the timing now that the holidays were approaching. Suddenly he remembered he had a mother. "That won't be necessary," I said calmly. "I've made other plans." The confusion in his voice was almost comical. "Other plans? With who?" As if the idea that I might have a life beyond waiting for his attention was incomprehensible. "With people who actually care about me," I replied. "Marcus, I've changed my will. You're no longer my beneficiary." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "You what? Mom, you can't be serious. I'm your son." "Yes," I said, "you are. And that makes your neglect even more heartbreaking." The anger came then, the real Marcus finally showing himself. "This is insane. You're punishing me because I have a life? Because I'm successful? I'm sorry I didn't answer the phone fast enough for you. But that doesn't mean you can steal my inheritance." Steal. As if love was a commodity I'd defrauded him of, rather than a gift he'd repeatedly rejected. "Marcus," I said, my voice calm despite my racing heart. "An inheritance is a gift from parent to child. It's earned through love, loyalty, and respect. You've shown me none of those things. You've earned nothing." He hung up on me, but not before I heard him say the words that confirmed every decision I'd made. "This is so typical. You've always been so dramatic and needy." The holidays came and went without a word from Marcus. I spent Thanksgiving volunteering at a homeless shelter, serving meals to people who thanked me with tears in their eyes for a kindness that cost me nothing but time. I spent Christmas Eve at the Children's Hospital, reading stories to kids whose parents never left their sides, even when the medical bills bankrupted them and exhaustion wore them down to shadows. These strangers understood what my own son never had, that love is action, not obligation. That showing up matters more than showing off. That family is defined by who stands with you when you're broken, not who appears when it's convenient. Spring brought news that Marcus and Emma had gotten engaged. I learned about it not from a phone call, but from a social media post that Emma's sister shared with a local friend. The photo showed them on some tropical beach, both grinning at the camera with the kind of self-absorbed happiness that comes from believing the world revolves around you. Emma's ring was enormous or clearly expensive. I wondered if Marcus thought about the mother who'd made his success possible when he bought it, or if I'd become so erased from his life that he'd forgotten where his privileges came from. A few months later, Harold called to tell me that Marcus had hired a lawyer to contest the will. "He's claiming you were mentally incompetent when you signed it," Harold explained, his voice tinged with disgust. "He's arguing that your heart attack affected your judgment." I actually laughed, at the audacity. My son, who couldn't be bothered to visit his mother in the hospital, was now claiming to be so concerned about my mental health that he was willing to drag our family through court to protect me. "Let him try," I told Harold. "I have medical records, witness statements, and a paper trail of his neglect going back years. If he wants to make this public, I'm ready." The case never made it to trial. Harold's preliminary filings included phone records showing Marcus's ignored calls, hospital documentation of my solitary emergency, and testimony from neighbors who'd witnessed years of my son's absence from my life. Faced with the reality of having his selfishness exposed in open court, Marcus quietly dropped his challenge. But not before sending me one final, revealing text message: "I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything between us." As if he hadn't already done that himself years ago. Today, I'm 73 years old and living the most authentic life I've ever known. My small apartment is filled with photos of the children I read to at the hospital, thank you cards from families who've benefited from my donations, and invitations to graduations from scholarship recipients whose dreams I've helped fund. These are my real family now. People who understand that love is reciprocal, that kindness matters, and that showing up is the most basic expression of caring. I sleep peacefully now, knowing that when I die, my legacy will be measured not by the ungrateful son I raised, but by the lives I've touched through my choices. The house that Marcus expected to inherit will shelter a family who'll appreciate every corner, every memory, every blessing. The money he assumed was his will educate children whose parents work as hard as I did, but whose love will be returned tenfold. My death won't leave behind a bitter son fighting over assets. It will leave behind a community of people who knew me, valued me, and loved me back. Sometimes I wonder if Marcus thinks about me, if he ever regrets the calls he didn't return, the visits he didn't make, the love he threw away for the sake of his own convenience. But mostly, I don't think about him at all. I've learned that you can't force someone to love you, but you can choose to love yourself enough to stop accepting crumbs. You can choose to build a family from people who show up, who care, who understand that relationships require effort from both sides. My heart is stronger now, not just physically, but emotionally. The chest pains have disappeared, controlled by medication and regular checkups with doctors who know my full medical history because I advocate for myself now. But more importantly, the emotional pain of constantly disappointing myself by expecting more from Marcus has ended. I no longer wait for calls that don't come or make excuses for behavior that's inexcusable. I've stopped being the mother of a son who forgot he had one, and I've become a woman who knows her own worth. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself in my story, if you're the parent who gives everything and receives nothing, if you're the one making excuses for adult children who treat you like an inconvenience, please know that it's never too late to change course. Your love is valuable, but it shouldn't be one-sided. Your sacrifice is meaningful, but it shouldn't be taken for granted. You deserve better than crumbs, and you have the power to demand it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is show people the natural consequences of their choices. Sometimes saving yourself is the only way to truly live. The lawyers have my final instructions. When my time comes, Marcus will receive his dollar and his letter, along with the knowledge that he had a mother who loved him enough to try teaching him what love actually means, even if the lesson came too late. My real inheritance, the one that matters, will go to people who understand that family isn't about blood, but about showing up, about answering the phone when someone needs you, about being present for the people who've been present for you. I called from the emergency room, and my son let it ring. So I left my real goodbye not in a voicemail he'd never listened to, but on a lawyer's desk where it would speak my truth forever. And for the first time in years, that truth has set me free.